years ago, the man known as D.B. Cooper startled the world by skyjacking an airliner and then, by parachute, vanishing with a fortune in the wilderness of Washington state. Authorities still don't know whether he's dead or alive. To them, he's a fugitive. To others, he's a legend.
He was a very unique military soldier. He had the ability to fly, to parachute, and to blow things up. He was a one-man walking wrecking crew.
He had brought him into the business, into the partnership.
There was a lot of illegal activity taking place.
My mom realized something was wrong.
Why would it be just leaving in the middle of the night with the front door open? Now we've got 2 missing people.
She didn't want to believe that he did it, but somebody murdered him, and who would have done it?
Calaveras County is a fairly small county in central California. It is about an hour east of Stockton and an hour south of Sacramento. We have Calaveras Big Tree State Park, where you can see giant sequoia trees.
It's definitely rural, a far cry from the streets of San Francisco.
It's just a desolately lonely place. It's easy for someone to get lost.
In February of 1978, law enforcement is on the hunt for a missing man, and the trail has led back to his own property.
The man who was missing mysteriously for 6 months, and nobody knew where he was.
We were working for the family. We wanted to get them some answers.
I very strongly believed that he was buried on the property in his own backyard.
Past search efforts on the property have been hampered by drought, which left the ground too hard to dig.
And after the rains had come, we went back on the property.
The sheriff's department go out to a location behind the main house.
And we found some indentions in the ground, which showed someone had been digging.
The sheriff's department was using piano wire to poke into the ground to determine the depth of the depressions.
It's like looking for buried treasure. You know, you try here, you try there. And all of a sudden they realized they had something.
The hole was covered with roofing material of some sort. And there was this white substance that looked like lime.
When the dirt is carefully removed, investigators find the body of a man.
It was not even 6 feet deep. It looked like he had been kneeling on one end of the hole and then fell over into the shallow grave that had been pre-dug.
We believed that we had found the missing man that I had been searching for. But we never could have imagined this missing person case would have morphed into a major national story. One of the most infamous cases in the history of the FBI.
Valley Springs, it is in the foothills of Calaveras County. It is mostly rolling grassy hills with oaks, cattle out in the fields.
Valley Springs is a very peaceful, rural area with lots of friendly, hardworking people.
In the 1970s, local couple Philip and Lucille Rackstraw are among the area's most established residents.
Philip Rackstraw was married to my grandmother, Lucille. She already had 2 young children, Robert, and then my mother, Linda. So when they got married, then they became his children. Philip and Robert would go fishing together and do all kinds of boy stuff. And he loved my mom. She was like his little girl.
Philip had a small construction business and a couple of pieces of equipment. He and his wife had a long and happy marriage together, and both of his stepchildren used his last name.
Philip's stepkids soon grow up. Robert joins the army to fight in Vietnam, and Linda settles in nearby Stockton with husband Jack LaDuca and young daughter Michelle. The family often visits the Rackstraws.
The homes were on, call them ranchettes, so it's very spread out, very modest, but it was their home. And it was up on top of a hill. It's a great place for kids to just, roam around.
Philip was quiet, but just very caring. And he loved his dogs. He always had them with him in the back of his truck.
In the early 70s, Robert came back from Vietnam to Valley Springs, and Philip always had worked for him in their construction business.
I think it was an earth moving business, so like tractors, backhoes.
Philip was maybe wanting Robert at some point to take over the family business.
But in 1977, life for the Rackstraws is forever changed when Lucille passes away after a year-long battle with cancer.
Philip's wife, Lucille, she was wonderful. She was wonderful, and it's sad to see her that she had passed. That had really affected Philip. He was very depressed. I mean, it was, his love.
Philip was close to his family and his mother, and close to his brother, Bill. He had a big support basis that helped him get through a difficult time after his wife, Lucille, passed.
He had some great neighbors who he was pretty close with, checked on him often.
Neighbors Ben and Lois Brooks often spend evenings with Philip. Lois introduces Philip to her sister, Marjorie, who is herself a widow. Soon, the two grow close.
Philip had begun seeing Marjorie. It seems like he was trying to pick up his life.
On July 26, 1977, Ben and Lois Brooks invite Philip and Marjorie to their home for dinner.
At this dinner, he was going to formally announce Marjorie was his girlfriend and that they were seriously dating.
And instead, Philip just never showed up.
Philip's neighbors are baffled. His girlfriend Marjorie hasn't heard from him since the day before, but he had given no sign that anything was wrong.
Philip doesn't answer the phone, so Ben goes over to the house. And he sees the gate is closed. Philip's dogs are there. Philip's car was there.
They found the door open, which is rather unusual. Inside, some of his clothes were gone. There was a bottle of alcohol of some kind on the floor. It was just kind of mysterious.
Ben called Robert, said, "Hey, your dad missed dinner. I haven't heard from him."
Robert indicated that his stepfather had a couple of jobs lined up, construction jobs, and he's probably on a job somewhere. His newfound girlfriend was even wondering that maybe he got cold feet, that he was double thinking this relationship before going public.
The sudden departure is unlike Philip. As days pass with no sign of him, concern grows for his family as well.
My mom couldn't get a hold of her stepdad, and it wasn't really like him to not return her calls. And Philip's brother was getting worried about him as well. My mom went to Valley Springs to the sheriff to fill out the missing person report.
At first, the concern was to determine whether or not Philip Rackstraw disappeared voluntarily.
But my mom's like, he's not going to leave the farm, the dogs. He would never do that.
But why would he be just leaving in the middle of the night with the front door open? Where is Philip? Monies were missing. Things were not going well in the construction business. Our client decided, "Hey, Jack, go to Hawaii. Go to Hawaii." Philip Rackstraw, he'd been missing for several weeks.
His daughter, Linda, is concerned because that was not his nature.
It was very stressful for her because her mom just passed away not too long before, and then she had to, deal with Philip missing.
His newfound girlfriend was very concerned and was genuinely upset about the whole thing. They were going to announce their new relationship. Everybody, that's a big deal.
The problem was, so we're talking the 70s, right? 40-something years ago?
In 1978, all the information that you can get in a heartbeat today might have taken you a week or more.
The police determined that Philip's neighbor, Ben Brooks, was the last to speak to Philip the afternoon before he didn't show for dinner. At the time, Philip had vented to Ben about some problems with the family business.
His neighbor tells police that things were not going well in the construction company. Philip was very concerned about some monies that were missing, some checks, and there was also some question about some stolen construction equipment.
Ben had heard that Philip was sort of struggling to pay some of the bills. He was concerned with not being able to pay his subcontractors from some of the funds.
Police learned that at one point that their construction company that Robert and Philip had together had been involved in dealing with some defective construction equipment, and clients, they were pretty upset.
Investigators came out in the early days and talked to Robert, and Robert is beyond his son at this point. I mean, he's also his business partner.
Robert Rackstraw indicated that Philip had a gambling problem, which was hurting the business. Police looked for the possibility that Philip might have any gambling debts.
The news of gambling and financial problems at work paint a concerning picture. Had Philip simply run away from it all?
His stepson told police that Philip had told him he has a liking for Hawaii and wants to live there.
Robert said, well, there was this large empty vodka bottle in the house. I think he went on a binger.
Robert thought he was on a drinking bender in Hawaii and he'd be back.
There was no evidence that pointed to any foul play. So Robert thought that his dad had just gone off to Hawaii.
My mom didn't really know what to do at that point.
So we're talking the 70s, right? Back then, you could buy an airline ticket and no one would know. We didn't have the internet. We didn't even have pagers.
Investigators can't follow a missing person if they don't know that that person is truly missing. If you want to go and live in Hawaii and not call your family and friends, it's not a crime.
The sheriff's department's hands are tied. If the family want to keep searching, they'll have to find a specialist.
Between August and September, that's when things really started getting rolling with okay, Philip had been gone for too long and really out of character for Philip.
Philip's brother talked to my mom, and he decided he was going to get a private investigator.
On my first conversation with our client, William Rackstraw, Bill Rackstraw, he simply gave me some bare facts that his brother Philip was missing, and he was very concerned. Personally spoke with the sheriff, and he simply indicated that he had done an investigation, had talked to people, and told me Philip was okay. He was in Hawaii, was on a major bender, because his wife had died recently. Well, sounded reasonable to me. Maybe he really is still in Hawaii.
This was a man who was family-oriented, was close to his brother.
And it was just unthinkable to our client, Bill, that he wouldn't talk to his mother or his brother. That didn't make sense at all. According to his stepson, Philip was probably in Maui, and he was in this little town of Lahaina. And that's when our client, Bill, decided, hey, Jack, go to Hawaii. Go to Hawaii.
In Hawaii, Jack reaches out to PI colleagues and begins a thorough search.
We had particularly good connections in Maui. And we checked everywhere. It's pretty hard for a drunk to be in that little area there and not be noticed by somebody. There's no way, based on our resources there, good connections with the police department, hotel people, everybody who would know if there was some drunk hanging around. This is not going to happen. It was clear. He simply wasn't there. He was not in Hawaii. So where was he? With everything we were learning through our investigation, we knew the missing Philip Rackstraw and wasn't in Hawaii, as had been reported by the sheriff initially. Our investigators began checking to see if maybe we'd missed something. Is he laying in a morgue somewhere in John Doe or in a state hospital?
I went through files to making sure that Philip Rackstraw had not been arrested, put in jail, was in an accident, came up with negative results.
And then we began checking to see about credit cards and bank accounts. Guess what? No bank activity, no checking, no use of credit cards since July 26. Okay, now we know something's rotten in Denmark. We looked for the possibility that if he had met with foul play, who might be responsible? Did he have any enemies? Since Philip may have had a gambling problem, a money problem, did he have any money that he might have owed someone? And we talked to many people, neighbors, people they might have worked with. No one that we talked to thought he had a gambling problem, one that would get him in trouble. Well, a lot of the stories that were being told to us about Philip didn't appear to have any validity at all. And we realized that they were all being generated by Robert Wesley Rackstraw, his stepson.
My mom was very conflicted because she just felt like basically Robert gaslighted her. So when you're getting gaslighted, you want to really believe the person who's doing that to you because it's somebody that you're close to and you care about. But everything that he was telling her just didn't add up.
We began interviewing people who might know something about the relationship between the missing Philip and his stepson. We learned there were some problems having to do with the family business. Bill Rackstraw told me about the arguments that Philip and his stepson were having.
Philip thought Robert was stealing money or writing bad checks. There was a blow up between the two.
My client, Bill Rackstraw, told me that his missing brother had indicated that he was going to get things together and probably go to the authorities. Things were really heating up down there, and then all of a sudden he disappeared. That's when Robert became the real center of interest here.
In 1977, a complete background check will take time. Private investigators canvass the community, hoping for more information about Robert.
Robert Rackstraw is not your average stepson. He had lived a very interesting life, and most of it not extremely positive of his own making.
Robert Wesley Rackstraw had been in the service in the military as an officer.
So Robert joined the U.S. Army and became a trained helicopter pilot. He flew in Vietnam.
I remember for a time he came out and gave us like a helicopter ride at their ranch in Valley Springs.
Robert allegedly had an enormous amount of medals and citations. However, we became aware of the fact that Robert had some problems in the Army.
The Army realized that he had lied on his enlistment. He, in fact, did not have a college degree. In addition, he had some domestic violence charges against his first wife.
He ran afoul of the authorities and was subsequently discharged because he had falsified his information.
Robert was kind of a wild guy. He would get into trouble.
People would just let it slide because he was just very charismatic.
In November, our investigative team went back and checked Philip's property and realized there were new tenants in his trailer.
Sometime in the fall, when he was supposedly in Hawaii, Robert rented out Philip's house.
Robert told the new tenants that Philip was not planning on returning to the area, so they were not aware of the fact that Philip, who owned the property, was missing mysteriously and nobody knew where he was. When Robert rented the property out to the new tenants, he kind of cautioned them to stay away from a part of the property where allegedly a well was located. And by that time, it was as clear as anything that Philip wasn't coming back. He was probably buried right there in the property. And I was convinced the guy who murdered him was Robert Wesley Rackstraw.
But Robert can no longer be found. He's left the Stockton area.
Neighbors recently noted a Beacon's moving truck at the residence of Mr. Robert Wesley Rackstraw. And guess what? Now we got 2 missing people. They found a good collection of guns and quite a bit of dynamite.
The CIA and the FBI have to get involved.
It was a one-man walking wrecking crew.
Philip Rackstraw has been missing for 5 months, and suspicion has fallen on his stepson Robert. But before Robert can be questioned, he skips town.
So now we have 2 persons who have disappeared, both of them without a trace.
Family and friends are starting to see Robert making up stories about his stepfather and manipulated everybody around him.
I think Linda, Philip's stepdaughter, had an inkling, an feeling that it could be her brother. Couldn't blame him.
When the tenants rented the home from Robert Rackstraw, he did warn them that there were some dangerous wells at the top of the hill.
A search of the property really needed to be made. But at the time, California had been in a major drought for a long time. The ground was very hard. If it ever rained, I knew it would soak it up pretty good, and there would probably be a depression up there if in fact Philip was there.
And so they waited for it to rain.
Private investigators soon learned that fraudulent checks cashed in nearby San Joaquin County had been connected to Robert Rackstraw.
Some checks had been made out to missing Philip, and apparently they had been forged.
Robert was writing bad checks on the bank account for the business. In the beginning of December, Robert is charged with forgery and fraud and suspicious checks.
My mom found out that Robert had been check kiting, so writing other checks to cover certain checks and that sort of thing.
Robert was stealing, was taking the money out of the business, was lying. There was a lot of illegal activity taking place.
On January 28, 1978, police head to Robert's home in Stockton to search for any clue as to their lead suspect's whereabouts.
Authorities did get a search warrant and search his property. There was no sign of Robert.
And then they discover in Stockton a storage unit on the property.
They found a good collection of guns and quite a bit of dynamite.
So much more than just missing.
Both private investigators and law enforcement suspect that Robert's crimes may be more extensive than they realized.
That becomes a federal offense at that point.
Investigators alert the FBI and learn Robert is already a wanted man.
It was then that I found out for the first time that the feds were looking for him too, and the reason was that possible connection to the only unsolved skyjacking case in the history of the country. It's crazy. The FBI believes that Robert Wesley Rackstraw might be the long-missing D.B. Cooper.
D.B. Cooper is the only human being who has ever hijacked a commercial jet successfully and never been caught.
D.B. Cooper is infamous as a skyjacker. He, as a well-dressed man in a suit, boarded a flight. He had explosives strapped to him and demanded $200,000. They landed and passengers were let off the plane, and the FBI gave him $200,000, refueled the plane, and the plane took off. And somewhere along that flight, D.B. Cooper jumped out of the back of the plane with his $200,000, and whereabouts unknown. D.B. Cooper was an alias. It was not a real name. And so what the FBI did was they tried to find suspects who would have been able to rig a parachute and jump from a plane.
Robert Wesley Rackstraw had special training in parachute jumping.
He could parachute, he could fly a helicopter, he was trained heavily by the military to do just about everything with explosives. I mean, he was a one-man walking wrecking.
Robert had been on the FBI's radar as the suspect in the theft of a shipment of explosives stolen from a quarry in Felton, California.
Once Robert was in the service and got kicked out, so I think he held a grudge towards the government. And he was a very, very smart man. Unfortunately, he used his intelligence for not good.
It was very upsetting to my mom. She obviously wanted to know what happened.
Investigators were eager to question Robert about both Philip's disappearance and the unsolved skyjacking, but they will have to find him first.
Federal authorities wanted to know whether or not we might have some clue as to where he might be. During the investigation in the field, we spoke with one witness who recalled that Robert happened to mention something about being interested in helicopters in the Middle East. The only helicopter operation of any significance that we could find was Bell Helicopter, who actually had an operation in Iran. We wondered, think he might be there?
A federal inquiry to Bell Helicopter soon confirms that Robert Rackstraw is one of their employees.
Robert is out of the country and in Iran, and Iran and the United States don't have an extradition treaty agreement.
They had to get him out of there, and the FBI did not want him getting away.
In February of 1978, fugitive from justice Robert Rackstraw has just been located in Iran. Robert's financial misdealings with the family business have made him the prime suspect in the disappearance of his stepfather, Philip Rackstraw.
Robert was found with the cooperation of Bell Helicopter and the FBI.
The CIA and the FBI have to get involved, and they negotiate an extradition.
They arranged for his trip back to New York, JFK Airport. When he landed, they put the bracelets on him.
Robert was arrested for the explosive charge, as well as check fraud in San Joaquin County.
The next day, February 21st, 1978, it rained after a long drought in California. So the search was finally made at the property of the missing man, Philip Rackstraw. It had recently rained after a long drought. There were imperfections and changes in the ground that were apparent. There were 2 depressions in the ground, indication that something had been disturbed near the trailer where he lived. They had piano wires and they were testing the ground, and they started to dig, and all of a sudden they realized they had something.
Investigators carefully removed the dirt. Beneath a panel of roofing material, they find a human body.
The body had been decomposed. Medical examiner estimated that the body had probably been in the shallow grave for about 4 to 6 months.
There were 2 small caliber bullets in the back of his head. There were traces of lime on the body.
The exhumed body is soon identified by dental records as the missing Philip Rackstraw.
When my mom found out that her stepdad was found deceased on their property, she was very upset. It was horrible for her. I remember she was just crying. My mom was very conflicted. She said, I didn't want to believe Robert did that. He was my brother. But I think once his body was found, I think that's when the realization hit her that somebody murdered him, and who would have done it.
Where they found Philip's body was in the same location where this well was that Robert had advised the renters to avoid the area.
Law enforcement believe all the evidence before the crime and after the crime pointed to Robert Rackstraw as the murderer.
On March 2nd, 1978, Robert Rackstraw was charged with the murder of his stepfather, Philip Rackstraw. Unfortunately for the prosecution, there wasn't a lot of physical evidence. The 70s are before DNA testing. The technology was not as advanced as we see today. And because the bank fraud charges against Robert Rackstraw were a pending case, a lot of it wasn't admissible in court. So a lot of it was just circumstantial evidence surrounding the numerous different versions of where Robert said Philip was.
The trial of Robert Rackstraw for the murder of his stepfather begins in July 1978.
I was shocked to see that Robert Wesley Rackstraw entered the courtroom in a wheelchair. Mr. Rackstraw's attorney had painted Robert Wesley Rackstraw as a war hero who had won multiple medals and commendations for heroic conduct.
It takes the jury just 2 days to reach a verdict.
They found that Robert Rackstraw was not guilty. I think it's a really hard jump to convict a son of killing their father without some sort of physical evidence. Robert's very intelligent. He's very calculating. And he did a really good job of painting himself as this disabled Vietnam veteran, just helping his stepdad out. All you need is a little bit of doubt.
They couldn't pin the murder on him, and I'm going, why couldn't they?
It's very frustrating and just really sad. Such an injustice that something like this could have happened.
Robert Robert Rackstraw is not guilty of the murder of his stepfather. The last chance for a conviction against Robert Rackstraw will be the fraud charges.
Robert Rackstraw beats the murder rap, and he is now being charged with other financial crimes, and he's out on bail. At the time, the FBI was still deeply involved in the D.B. Cooper case.
Bob Rackstraw never said anything, but he liked being sought out as D.B. Cooper, and he always wanted the attention that came with it.
The FBI is unable to prove a connection to the skyjacking. A year into the case, Robert remains free on bail.
Several months later, I'm driving home from a visit in San Jose, and I just have the radio on, and I hear someone saying, and there's a plane over Monterey Bay. There's a possible fire in the cockpit. We have a mayday, and all of a sudden, and the pilot, Robert Rackstraw. And I said, oh my God, that son of a bitch is going to disappear again. I can't believe it.
Robert Rackstraw has been acquitted in the murder trial of his stepfather, Philip Rackstraw. With fraud and explosives charges pending, Robert is out on bail when news of a freak plane crash in Monterey Bay rocks the case.
Comes out that Robert had rented a plane from the Stockton Municipal Airport, and while flying alone all over Monterey Bay, he called in a mayday.
The Coast Guard did a search.
They were unable to locate the plane in any fashion.
I just couldn't believe it. How convenient that this plane crash occurred one day before Mr. Rackstraw is due to show up for this trial.
The FBI shares Jack's suspicion that the plane crash was a fake. Law enforcement agencies are alerted to a possible fugitive from justice.
Several months after the Mayday, a print shop somewhere in Southern California called the authorities. A man showed up attempting to get some what appeared to be forged documentation for a planer for himself.
Authorities respond to the scene and interview the suspicious customer. Although he is sporting a new beard and freshly dyed hair, the man is quickly identified as missing pilot Robert Rackstraw.
He didn't have a crash. He flew beneath the radar, a couple of 100 feet, I guess. Then he flew off with the plane and apparently took it into Southern California, painted the tail numbers out, and got a new registration.
The missing plane is located in a nearby airport hangar. Wanted fugitive Robert Rackstraw has started a new life in Southern California under an assumed name.
The authorities got the arrest warrant, and finally, the missing pilot is found again.
They ended up bringing him back to San Joaquin County to face charges, now for forgery and the stealing of an aircraft and a false mayday.
At the trial in February of 1979, prosecutors detail Robert's financial misdealings with Philip's business.
Philip, before he disappeared, was very concerned about monies. They had a business. They had a lot of bills to pay, but the money which would be used to pay a lot of bills was gone. And our investigation clearly showed that it didn't disappear except into the pocket of his stepson, Robert Wesley. Robert finally gets convicted for theft and forgery.
Robert is sentenced to 1 year in prison.
All that trouble, they just got him for 1 year, but they finally got him.
He was released in August of 1980.
It's an unusual end to a remarkable case.
This particular case wound up being involved in a major national crime. It's unbelievable.
Authorities still don't know whether he's dead or alive.
I mean, it's a fascinating story. Stealing explosives, stealing planes, faking aircraft crashes, swindling people out of their money. And was he D.B. Cooper? We don't know.
My mom just really wanted some sort of closure for what had happened because she just felt like even though Bob did go to trial for it, but he was acquitted, she was really sad about it.
It was very tragic that this very nice man lost his wife and was trying to move on, and right in the midst of his beginning a new life, he's cut down.
As I remember Philip, he was just a rough, tough guy on the outside, but he had a good heart. And especially then when our daughter Michelle, came about, I'm sure he was really, really happy.
I missed out on not having a grandfather. I think he would have been a fun grandpa to have, maybe take me fishing or, sleuthing for gold or anything. My mom would have wanted Philip to be remembered as being a veteran, giving part of his life to be in the military, but then also being a kind person and being a loving husband and father.
Mama, ngắm anh thuê bát lên phòng as the snow falls gently from above. I'm reminded of gone on that love. Each flake